Hey everyone, what's up? MiRai here, and welcome to my personal overview for the 2+3 that Svpernova and I are doing, where I am playing the tank and the healer, and he is playing his 3 hunters. Now, there is a little bit of intro to this. First of all, this is probably going to be a long video, no matter how short I try to make this. It's an overview video. They're always long. There's no way around that, right? I don't know what the runtime is, but obviously you do. You're already watching this on YouTube. So there you have it. But this is just an overview. This is not going to be a fine detail combing through everything, step by step, action by action, where I show how to set things up. This is not a setup video. This is just an overview video. We're going to talk about my setup, and I'm going to share my profile. It's going to be in the video description, but there's some things to know about that as well. When it comes to sharing, when it comes to using someone else's profile, you normally can't just take it, load it into your ISBoxer, fill in your characters real fast, and then export, and then launch, and then play. You normally can't do that. Beyond the wizard setup, from that point forward, everyone customizes their ISBoxer to fit their own personal setup, their own personal play style, the keybinds that they use, the mouse binds that they use, everything, right? So obviously I'm set up for everything my own personal way. There's going to be plenty of stuff that doesn't work right out of the box for you, and it's not meant to replace any sort of setup for you. It's meant as a reference. You should load it in your ISBoxer, look over some of the things I've got in there. If you're interested in some of the systems I got, some of the stuff I've got going on, check it out, look at how it's set up and say, oh, okay, and then integrate that into your own personal setup. So there's that. I do have sort of a list here, so trying to keep it short. It's not going to be, but we're trying to keep it short. Right, if you've got any questions about parts in the profile and maybe why I did something, feel free to ask those in the comments. But if you're looking for something like, how do I set up click bar healing from scratch? Well, that's not really a question that belongs in the comment section, right? That's a question that belongs in a forum somewhere, in a public forum where more people can see it, more people can benefit from that information, not tucked away in a YouTube channel comment somewhere that no one's going to find later on down the line, right? So with that said, because this is my own personal setup, I am recording at 4K. And because of that, the text is going to be incredibly small. And I will be trying my best to zoom in on the parts when we're in ISBoxer, or if we need to focus on anything else in particular on the screen, I'll be zooming in. If you find that annoying, I apologize, but this is why I don't do tutorials at 4K, even though I have a 4K setup. I generally max everything out at 1440 because you can still read the text just fine on lower size, smaller size monitors. And finally, you don't even have to watch this video. You can go watch the Pro System series, video series that I've got. It's about 5 videos long. It's on my channel because that is going to answer pretty much everybody's questions about how to set any of this stuff up. The vast majority of things in my profile that you're going to see and things that I'm going to talk about here are already in tutorial videos. I'm using a poor man's Pro System that I just kind of whipped up in a day before Svpernova and I started streaming, and I've slowly been adding things to it here and there. But you're going to hear me refer back to the Pro System series again and again. And it's not trying to brush anyone off, but I'm just letting everyone know that this is from that video in the Pro System series. This might be from a different video in the Pro System series. You're really going to benefit if after you see this and you like what you see and you haven't checked out the Pro System yet, you should do that. The first few videos are showing how to set everything up, and the final video in this series is showing how versatile and sexy the Pro System can be. I told you guys, we're talking to people here. No going AFK. So anyway, I think that's it for the intro. So let's talk about my setup. Okay, so I am using a standard window layout. It's stacked, and what I'm using in the bottom right corner there is a video effects viewer. It's interactable. If you're not familiar with video effects, I did just recently do a video on my channel which goes over the basics and pretty much shows this. It's able to be toggled on and off at will. And the camera, I know some people are going to ask about the camera, my face on the camera. This is an external camera that I record with. I capture video footage, I capture the audio from the mic, and I capture this camera all separately, and I sync it together at the end in my video editing programs. I use the Adobe stuff, the Adobe suite, if anyone is interested in all of that. So the camera is completely separate, but I overlay it at a later point in time so that everyone can see my pretty face. And I know some people don't like that, but I don't care. So anyway, it's a very basic layout. I can swap screens very quickly with a button on my mouse. It's easy to do that with just 2 characters, right? It's very easy to do that. If I had 5 characters, you know, it's not as quick to just swap between windows that way. I'd probably set something up a little bit different, but for 2 characters, I just swap with the button on my mouse. What you might also notice now is when I'm swapping windows, you will see that shadow that pops in every time, right? So what that is I'm using a slot swap macro to change my SSAO setting. So all of this is the same set on both windows, except for the SSAO setting. The SSAO setting is set to ultra in the foreground and completely turned off in the background because SSAO is kind of a hog. I think it does the scene justice. I love the look of ambient occlusion, but unfortunately it is an absolute resource hog. So I turn it off in the back to save on some, the background to save on some resources. But that's my video settings. My Paladin has a standard rotation that she goes through. And you'll notice that I exclude the Shaman by default from that. I do have a button that I can press that will toggle the Shaman DPS on when I need to. It's generally off. It starts off. It's I don't really feel confident. I'm taking a lot of damage in these recent dungeons that we're in. I'm taking a lot of damage when we pull even just a few things. So generally the Shaman DPS is turned off. You may have seen it in, I may have turned it on a few times in some of the past videos. I don't know if they made it into the highlights part or not, but I have turned it on a few times and whatnot, but I can't turn it off. And then she'll just stand there and do nothing. Now, the reason for this is because, I mean, if you're trying to jam both your healing and your DPS rotation down the same pipeline, well, unfortunately, they're going to fight against each other. And if you need a heal, you might be casting a DPS spell at the time that you need that heal. And you're not going to get that heal, and you're going to die. That's going to be that. So I turn it off, and I do this for pretty much all of my healers and all of my setups. I have a toggle. And I like to just be able to heal with my healer until I'm confident that I can turn on the DPS rotation on the healer and just add a little bit, right? Because if the healer's not healing when they need to be healing, then people are dying and you're not doing the DPS you should be doing anyway. So you might as well just keep the healer sitting in the background and ready to heal. Now, the other thing about my rotation is that, and some people have been watching me for a while, this will all sound familiar. I might repeat myself from time to time if you've been watching me for a long time, but new people come and go all the time, so I like to repeat myself to make sure everyone is kind of on the same page with what I do. So Paladins Consecrate, and in my rotation, I don't throw down a Consecrate. I don't insert Consecrate into my rotation, right? I do it manually. I actually hit the Consecrate button to throw down a Consecrate. And the reason for this is that, and I don't mean to call Svpernova out, but when him and I did our last 2+3, where he was running Warrior Priest and I was running DPS Paladins, he would constantly charge off into a pack and waste his Thunderclap because he was using it in part of his rotation. And, you know, he charges, and then the next available spell in the rotation would be a Thunderclap because he's still out of range. In the middle of the charge, he's still out of range of being able to use Shield Slam, Devastate, and whatever else, right? So then he would waste the Thunderclap. He would get to the pack, and he wouldn't have any cleave damage to hit the enemies to keep them on him. Now, this wasn't a very large problem, but it probably would have become a big problem had we made it to higher level content where things would do a bit more damage to us. So that's why I don't like to, you know, and I can show this off here. So if I'm back here and we're running up to this target, right, we're starting. So I'm going to throw my shield, I'm going to throw a judgment, and then I'm going to waste, in my rotation, I'm going to waste my Consecrate back there. Well, that's no good. Well, obviously I could run the pack back here, but what if we want to keep running? What if we want to keep moving? Well, now my Consecrate is way back there, right? So I don't really like to put my Consecrate in my rotation for that reason. So maybe that's a little helpful hint for some people. You might want to pull that out, but it's up to you. It's up to you. Okay, so next I guess we can talk about healing. For building a rotation, there is a Pro System Series video dedicated to building a rotation. So the way I've got my stuff set up in ISBoxer, which we'll go over in a minute, there is a video specific for that in the Pro System video series that will show how to set up a rotation, exactly how I've got it set up. So, but the healing setup. So what happened in the first video that when we first started streaming just a week ago, I was using these click bars. You will have seen these click bars. That's what they are. These white borders, these rectangles are click bars. And what happens is they're set up in such a way, and again, this is derived from the Pro System, which does have its own separate video. There's a whole video on click bar healing for the Pro System. And that's what this is. So when you mouse into the click bar, it does a mapped key, and it turns on an entirely new key map with a set of hotkeys that you can use while you're inside of this area. So outside of this area, my mouse wheel down does flash of light on my Paladin. That's bound to my action bar. When I mouse into here, my Shaman will cast her heal. And she uses a mouse over macro. If Svpernova was on, I'd show it on his characters, but he's not. But it uses a mouse over macro, so when I mouse over the tank, she obviously uses her healing surge on the tank. When I mouse over her, she uses her healing surge on herself. And I have this, I have Riptide in there, I have Purify in there, and all of that. And that's great. That's very versatile, but it's also not 100%. It's not 100%. I felt that I was really lacking in healing. I found myself when I was trying to do DPS, my mouse is generally over here. That's just where my resting position for the mouse is. I should rest it closer to these uniframes, yes, but I don't. I can move the uniframes over to the right, yes, but that kind of drives me crazy. I've tried that before, and it just completely throws me off. It feels so unnatural that the party frames are on the right-hand side. It just doesn't work for me. So the party frames stay on the left, my resting position continues to stay on the right, and this is my own personal conflict that I have to deal with, right? I have to work through this problem. So that's the problem I'm finding, is that when I'm in the heat of battle like this, we're fighting things, he's DPSing, we're running around like crazy, picking up a bunch of enemies, and I'm having to keep the tank up, right? So at the same time, I'm trying to whip my mouse cursor over here with precision and get it into this little box so that I can start spinning my mouse wheel down to give her healing surge and riptides and whatnot, and that was just becoming such a distraction. So what I did was, on my mouse, I have bound my thumb wheel. You probably can't see my overlay here very well. I'll put up a stock photo of my mouse. It's got a thumb wheel. You'll see the thumb wheel, and it's got a little button on the side, circular button. We'll talk about that too. So the thumb wheel is now bound to hard-coded healing for the tank and the tank only. So I spin the thumb wheel one way, she'll do a healing surge. I spin it the other way, she'll do a riptide. If I hold shift and spin it one way, she'll do a healing wave. And if you watched the second video, I think is where we start off in Zul'Farrak, I was finding myself getting polymorphed a lot. I mean, that's what happens in Zul'Farrak. They have a polymorph that they do to the tank, and then when the tank is polymorphed, they all run away, and they go fight the person who's next highest on threat. So I was constantly, once again, having to move my mouse cursor over here and spin it up for a Purify. And that was just, man, it's happening a lot. And by the time I can do it fairly quick, and I was doing a fairly good job of it, but at the same time, that's time wasted. I mean, to get it over to here, from the right-hand side over to here, it's like half a second. And then just to make sure you're here and then spin it up, it's another half a second. You just wasted an entire second, which could be, the difference between a wipe and not a wipe, right? So what I've done is I've also hard-coded with shift mouse wheel up. I've hard-coded Purify for my tank as well. So I've done some hard coding. There are some people who play with all hard-coded macros, and that's still something that I cannot condone. That to me is super restrictive. The click bar healing gives much more flexibility when it comes to just setting things up for different parties and whatnot. as opposed to hard coding things specifically to say like number pad 1 through 5. Although whatever your play style is, it is what it is, right? That's just, I can't tell you how to play. I can't tell you how to enjoy the game or what to set up to enjoy the game more. I like click bar healing, but I found in this particular sense where I now have to do crazier stuff, it just feels different even with Svpernova playing his hunters. I'm managing less characters. I'm only managing 2 as opposed to a full 5. And for some reason, I'm finding healing to be more difficult. And I don't know why that is, but I am. And what has really taken a lot of pressure off me is being able to hard code my heal and just spin my thumb wheel. All I have to do is just spin my thumb wheel. While I'm doing this, I don't have to worry about moving the cursor over and making sure I'm on the unit frame. Now, of course, when he needs healing, I get to him. I eventually get to him whenever the tank is okay. Whenever the tank is okay, I'll eventually heal Svpernova. But because lately he's just been carrying me. I'm just going to throw that out there. He's just been carrying me. But to finish up healing here, I do have 2 other cool little things here. Some of you may have seen this before. Some of you may use this in your own personal setup. I have finally integrated Healing Rain, which is a reticle target, into my setup. So Alt mouse wheel up brings up a video effects overlay window, which allows me to place it wherever I want. Now, clearly, you can see the reticle in the bottom video effects window. I don't always have time to look down there. And again, with the 2-man setup, it's not a big deal. But because I generally set things up for more than a 2-man setup, like pretend the windows are even smaller, right? You wouldn't really be able to see very well if your windows were even smaller, if the background windows were even smaller in your traditional window layout, right? So it really helps to have this overlay here. It's a little choppy. That's just the nature of the way that it is, but it is that way. And you click, and then I set my Healing Rain down right there. And I've also got this for one of her totems. It's a Spirit Link totem, I believe is what it's called. So that's something that I can use and something that I'm trying to use in my setup. I've thrown Healing Rain down a few times the last time we ran, and I don't know. I usually forget about it. Just because it's in my setup doesn't mean I necessarily remember to use it every time, right? So what's next here? What's next before we jump into ISBoxer? Okay, so I did forget to talk about the, I was going to talk about the little button on the side. I made it a point to point it out earlier. So what that does is it's a 4-directional button, and you can also press it as a button as well. So it's got 5 buttons in one, I guess is what you would say. It's a 5D button is what it's called. Some people might call it a hat button. It is what it is. But anyway, it's got 4 directions. It can go up, down, left, and right, so that I attach my movement keys to that as well. So what I can do is I can move the shaman. Whoever I'm not focused on, I can move them forward, back, left, and right. And that helps me get out of fire, in theory, although I will, of course, forget to use it when it comes time to do that. But then again, with a 2-character setup, it's not a big deal to just jump over to the other character and move them out of the fire, so to speak, right? But what you can do, even if you're playing from the healer, strafe over, reinteract, strafe over, reinteract, lay down a Consecrate. So on Consecrate, I didn't point this out earlier. The Consecrate is set up globally on Shift 4 to, I can lay it down from the healer or the Paladin. So. But yeah, so it's useful to be able to have that. But here's the other thing it's important to do is that a lot of people like to be able to leave their ranged characters behind, right? So you do that like that. All I did was just press the down key on my little 4-directional button there. And all that does is just press back, right? So, she can walk back, I can interrupt healing, or if I need to bring her closer, if I feel she's too far away, I'll hit follow, I'll break it with my back key, hit follow, I'll break it with my back key. So that's something that I find really useful in this mouse. And I guess maybe I should point out, maybe I should go off on a slight little tangent here, talk about some other personal take on mice and input devices here. I'll try to make this quick. So I know that there's a lot of people who have like Nagas and G600s from Logitech and whatever it's called that Corsair makes. Either way, there's even another 20 or 30 Chinese knockoffs on Amazon as well. So there's no shortage of those mice that have 12 buttons along the side in a grid-like pattern, right? Now, clearly, you can see I'll put the picture back up if it's not still up, of my mouse. It's a little bit different. It also has 12 buttons on the side. It's got mouse 4, mouse 5. It's got the 5 directional button. That's 7. It's got the forward and backward on the left and right of the 5 directional button. That takes us to 9. It's got a thumb button that takes us to 10. And then the thumb wheel, which spins left and right, is another 2 that takes us to 12. So I've also got 12 buttons on the side of my mouse, but they're laid out in such a way that they more or less fit my finger a lot better than something like a Naga, something with that grid-like 12-button setup. I just don't really think I would find that comfortable. I mean, you may love your Naga or your G600 or whatever the other ones are called. You may love it, and that's absolutely fantastic. I'm not here to tell you how not to love your mouse. But people have asked me before why I don't use a Naga or mice like that. And I don't think I would enjoy that. I think I don't have gargantuan hands, but I really think my thumb, I would end up fat fingering buttons that I just don't want to fat finger. And there's no real distinctive pattern to it. It's just a grid, right? With this mouse and the side of it, it's got, there's distinction between each button and what I'm pressing and what I have assigned to it. So that's me. That's my own personal take on why I use this mouse. If you like this mouse, unfortunately, it is end of life and they don't make it anymore. I do have several of the mice. I bought up as many as I could at sort of an affordable price. So I do have several of these mice. And I've also bought backup switches for when the switches go on them. So if you can find an MMO7 mouse at an affordable price, you should probably grab it up if you want it. Otherwise, they're going to be pretty expensive. They retailed at $130 when they were still in production. But I think maybe the final thing to talk about before we jump into ISBoxer, 2 things to talk about real fast maybe. You may have seen in some of the videos, I don't remember at this point in time what made it into the highlights and what didn't. But you may see me, sometimes I jump over to the Shaman and then I'll click my heroism button because I don't have it bound to anything. I mean, it is bound to something, but unfortunately, that key is actually taken up by a mapped key, by a hotkey in ISBoxer. So I have to come over here and click it, and that's really not ideal, right? So you can see right here, there's a heroism button, and I can just click this and we get heroism. So that's something I integrated now. It's a lot easier for me to activate heroism from either window. I still have to click a button. I could assign a hotkey if I want to, but I don't feel that heroism is something I use all that often, right? So it's not all that big of a deal to click it. It's a giant button. I think it's fine where it is. But in addition to that, the overlay here, the overlay in the upper left is something that's very super custom to me. You can see that I do use my mouse, and you may have noticed that as I click the buttons, middle mouse lights up, left click, right click. Even the inside buttons light up. And the thing about the inside buttons is you can see that they actually coincide with what's happening on the keyboard overlay. So I have Shift-Alt-R, which is obviously the default for repeater. I have that bound to my inside left click mouse button. So you can see that I hold that down, but it also holds down Shift-Alt-R on the keyboard. So that's, to me, that's very cool. I set this up. This is all custom. I had to cut all this out and make all of these overlays very special. Even when I spin the mouse, the thumb wheel left and right, you can see that it actually lights up in that direction. And you can see if you look, I'll zoom in. I'm pointing at the screen as if you could see where I'm pointing. But if you look at the little tiny button on there, you can see that when I go in those directions, maybe this will work better if I put her over here closer to the zoom. So, you can see me press those buttons and they actually light up, and you can see that she moves at the same time. So that's something that it took a lot of work to get that working. I didn't do it all by myself. I did have help setting that up. So that is something I find really cool. The mouse, this won't be in the profile that gets shared. It doesn't really carry over all that well. It would be an absolute pain in the ass to show people how to set this up. It's maybe a video in the future someday perhaps, but not for the mouse. There is already a video about the keyboard overlay on my channel, and I did have something here. Kind of the background here is that you need to have 3 states for every button, at least if you want it to be animated like this. I can click the buttons. They don't do anything though. They're just for show. They just intercept. My keyboard. They don't actually. I can't actually press those. I guess you could set it up to press them, but that's even more complicated than what's set up now. But you can check out that video. It's a little bit older. It should still work. I think there's one minor problem with it, but if you check out the keyboard overlay video, I don't know. If you have questions about it, then ask about it. If you're really in dire need of one of these keyboard overlays. I just thought it was cool, and I've re-enabled it for this series that we're doing. But I think that's it. You know, I guess I should do this. A lot of people ask about my add-ons. This isn't an add-on overview. I'm not going to go over why I chose what add-ons or why I put them where I put them or what fonts I use and this and that. But I'll show you my add-ons. We're just going to go down this list. I'm going to click down. It goes page by page. If you see it, pause the video if you want to read this a little bit better. I'm going to just move down this. I'm not giving any support for these. People say, what add-ons do you use? Here's the list. Here you go. This is the current list as of the middle of June. I mean, a mini-map is a mini-map. Unit frames are unit frames. Damage meters are damage meters. It's all the same. A chat add-on is a chat add-on. They all do the same stuff for the most part. And you're going to see some of these, and I imagine that some of them, my UI is pretty much held together with duct tape. Like my unit frames, for example, I don't think they work with monks. I don't think they work with warlocks. There might be some other classes they don't work with. So yeah, it's held together with duct tape, and I'm not here to like support anything and give my UI out and say, here you go. This is perfectly working, because it's far from perfectly working. It is far from perfectly working. Okay, so this is my profile. And again, it is available in the description. There is a disclaimer that comes along with the profile. If you skipped the intro part of this video, please go back and watch that. There's a disclaimer there about what you can and can't do with the profile, or what your expectations may be with loading in someone else's profile. But I guess we'll just go down some of the important mapped keys here and point out where some of the systems are located and some of what they do. One thing I didn't mention here, I guess, is what I should have when we were in the game a moment ago, is that it's my assist and my interact is separate from my DPS keys. The default wizard setup has the option to integrate in interact with assist, and I separate that. And that's, I guess we'll jump back in game real fast here. So if I'm on the healer, what can happen, anyone who has played melee classes before and has spammed interact with target, you will know that a lot of the time you're going to get this, where if you stop spamming this, your character just runs away like an idiot, right? That's not ideal. That is not what I want to happen. So what happens is, in PvE, I just hit it once and they go up to the target. Now, if you do get a runaway, let's see if I can get a runaway again. It's harder to get runaways on targets that stand still, but let's see if we can get it. So what happens, what helps here is, again, my back button. If you hit back, they'll clear up the runaway. But I still don't spam my key because of that. It's easy to just press it once and go where you want to go, and that's that. But in addition to that, I can attack with one character, and I can turn the DPS rotation on my Shaman, and I can attack 2 different characters, right? And I won't have the tank come back this way. So if I need to send the tank off to go do something tanky for a moment, I can do that, and I can stay on this target. Not really a huge deal with my 2-man setup. Much more versatile if you want to kind of move into, say, something like raids, where you may have an off tank that needs to go pick something up, right? You don't want to switch to their screen, but you also don't want everyone and their mother to switch targets and assist the off tank. So, this is where this can come in handy, where you can switch targets with one guy and not have to worry about everyone else switching with them. So that's why I break that off. I just find it just gives me more control over what I'm doing. Does that mean that sometimes I forget to hit assist and interact when I'm doing things? Of course. It's a trade-off. Do you want to have runaways? Do you want to have everyone always assist all of the time? Or do you want more control with the side effect that you might not remember to hit the button every single time? Yes, sometimes my tank is standing a few feet away from the enemy and not actually doing her rotation properly. But then when I realize that, I hit the interact key, she moves up to the target, and she engages as she should. It is what it is. It all comes down to your playstyle, right? So this is the Pro System. And you'll see this in the Pro System video series as I talk about it, where we set up single target DPS rotations, AoE DPS rotations. I don't have anything set up for an AoE DPS rotation at this point in time, just single target. I only pretty much just spam my 2 key for now. I have an interrupt and a stun. The Shaman doesn't have a stun. She has a totem that can do stuns, but I don't rely on that as part of a stun rotation. So only the Paladin does a stun, so there's really only one character in that rotation that does a stun. I have 2 interrupts though. They each have an interrupt. It is on round robin. The thumb button is part of my mouse. It doesn't do anything special. It just throws my Avenger shield if I need to do that separately. Here's my global consecration. That works from any window. Again, I separate that from my DPS rotation. I explained that a moment ago. Toggle Shaman DPS. We will come back to this. That's about toggling the Shaman DPS. Here's my hard-coded healing down here. 8 and 9 are my thumb wheel. So that's why you see 8 and 9 over here. Mouse wheel up, mouse wheel down. I did show Healing Rain and Spirit Link. That's with the send next click. And what that is if you're interested in that, remember the this dealio. That's what this is. This is, you can use the Mapped Key Wizard. I use the Mapped Key Wizard to set this up. Yes, MiRai does not set everything up from scratch as if it's back in the olden days. He does sometimes use the Mapped Key Wizard. So we use the Mapped Key Wizard, and it's right here. It's called Straight Key Broadcast plus click. And G is what my Healing Rain is on, so I would hit the G key. I would set the target to be my healer ATG or straight to that character in this 2-man setup, and I would hit finish. And that would make this. So G goes to my ATG of healers. ATG is Action Target Group, if you're not familiar with that. It's not really important that this is an Action Target Group. Again, I only have 2 characters. One's a tank, one's a healer. So Action Target Groups come in they're much more useful when you have multiple classes and more than 2 characters. But here's the send next click option. And these checkboxes are not normally checked by default. I don't want the click to go through to my Paladin, so I block the click from the current window. And then if you want the video effects window, you enable these options and you set the source and the output to the same size. If you don't, you might get some weirdness. You might get some weird scaling. There might be some pixelation and whatnot. Now, again, this is video effects. So you should watch if you're not familiar with video effects, you should watch the video effects videos to really get a grip on how video effects should be used. The fact that you need to use a stacked window layout, otherwise you're going to have pixelation in your video effects windows. But that's all covered in the video effects videos on my channel. So check those out. Oh, and also, I guess there is actually, this is called cursor-based video effects. And there's actually a cursor-based video effects video on my channel. It's a little bit older, but it's still, this option has not changed between ISBoxer 41 and 42. It does show it off in Diablo, which is another game that benefits from cursor-based video effects. So check that out as well if you want to. Lots of good stuff on my channel. Again, we'll come back to the Shaman DPS. So what do I have here? We've got, there's nothing really special and always on. I do have did I say this earlier? I got a slot swap macro that sets camera style. Camera smooth style is the camera following style in the interface options. It sets a set view. And this is all unused. This is all the heirloom neck pieces for healing. I used that with the Paladins. This profile was not built from scratch. I pulled it from the Paladins and then I tore a bunch of shit out of it and I didn't tear everything out of it. So I thought maybe I would use this again at some point in time because I do have the heirloom necks. I am wearing the heirloom neck pieces, so I thought maybe I would reintegrate this at some point in time. I haven't done that yet, and I don't know if I will. So next window, here's my create and destroy. That's something here when we're in game. So obviously the overlay is kind of in the way. Like if I needed to get into the dungeon and raid finder, I can't really do that because there's an overlay in my way, right? So what I do is I toggle the overlays on and off, just like that. When I turn key maps off, when I turn key maps on, key maps off, key maps on. So that I can, actually use things, because you set up enough click bars, you set up enough overlays, and all of a sudden you're blocking a good portion of your screen where you would normally have to interact with something. So it does help to be able to turn them off. That's what this does. Anything in non-combat, anything special, pretty basic stuff. Here's my VFX create, two-step for creating and destroying. Check that out if you want. I don't know if follow train works. I have no idea. So if you look at that and you're like, why doesn't this work, MiRai? I don't know. I don't know. I don't use it. I don't know why it was set up. It's probably set up for the Paladins. I don't know why I have a screenshot timer. Don't say, hey, MiRai, why do you have a screenshot timer? I don't know. It's gone. Never mind. It's gone. It's all gone. Anything special in here? Here's my others walk forward. This is what's bound to up, down, left, right, so I can move my other character with my little 4-directional button on my mouse. If you do load some of this stuff into your profile, I guess I should say that I do use ESDF to move instead of WASD. So if you load some of this stuff in and you're like, why aren't my movement keys working? Well, my variable keystrokes are set to ESDF for movement and not WASD. There's that. We'll go over the click bar stuff in just a second. That's kind of in-depth. This action bar, I'll just quickly touch on this real fast. The Pro Systems series touches on this. Specifically, the building a rotation video touches on this. The reason for this is that when you want to create a rotation via spamming a bunch of keys, very similar to like a cast sequence macro, but arguably less work than setting up a cast sequence macro. If you spam, let's say I want to spam the keys 2, 3, and Shift 4, right? So 2, 3, and Shift 4. If I send those 3 keys as keystroke actions in the same step, that modifier from Shift 4, the Shift modifier, is going to bleed over into every single one of those keys. So instead of being 2, 3, and Shift 4, it's now going to be Shift 2, Shift 3, and Shift 4. And what this action bar key map does is this allows me, the way to fix that then is you need to create individual mapped keys for each key press that you want it to happen. And then you use do mapped key actions to send those individual keys, and they're sent correctly then. You will send 2, 3, and Shift 4 instead of having that modifier bleed over. That's just a quick gist of how it works. It's detailed much more nicely in the Pro System video series. So check that out. And these are my class key maps that you would learn about in the Pro System. I'm using the same virtualization on my character level virtualization and then leading to the class key maps. And my single target DPS for the Shaman is just, for the Paladin is just 4 keys, and the second step is 3 keys with 1 removed. I believe Shield of the Righteous is not included in the second step because I don't want to spam it all that often. It is off the global, and you tend to spam it way too much, so I try to break it up a little bit. Again, I could probably solve that easier with a cast sequence macro, but having to figure that out is just, this was faster to do at the time that I was setting everything up. So maybe in the future, I'll create a cast sequence macro. Who knows? And then the Shaman, of course, DPS, her single target, is turned off by default. This is for the Paladin. It's just specific to using Divine Steed from her window. If I want to use Divine Steed for the Paladin from her window, that's what this is. But I guess we can talk about this now. And we're almost done. We're almost done here. We're just going to talk about this toggle, and then we'll talk about the click bars. Where am I header? Combat hotkeys. So this is it's pretty straightforward. And the icon that pops up, you did see the little sword icon that pops up next to her unit frame. That indicates that her DPS rotation is enabled, right? So she'll do her rotation. If I hit it, sword disappears, and she'll stop doing what she's supposed to be doing. So that's what this is. It's a click bar. Nothing special. It's just a stock photo I found, stock image I found on Google. I was like, this looks nice. So we included that. Now what I'm using here is I'm using a mapped key state action and a mapped key step action. Now this is a little advanced, although I don't think so. Once you really understand how it works, you're like, oh, okay, great. Well, the mapped key state actions, I do talk about these. I talk about these in the Pro System video series. In one of the videos, I talk about key map state actions and mapped key state actions, and I show them off visually very nicely across 3 different action bars about how you can set up different rotations by turning on mapped keys and turning off mapped keys with clicks of a button and whatnot. So that's what I'm doing here. Remember, this starts off, the red, when a mapped key is red like this, it means it's off by default. So what happens is we turn it on in step 1. When I press that button, we turn it on for her. And then what this is a mapped key state, mapped key step action. I'm sorry, this is a mapped key step action. What this does is help preserve the step of the mapped key in all of the windows. That might sound a little complex, but there is actually a video that talks about mapped key step actions on my channel. Again, it's older, but this option has not changed between ISBoxer 41 and 42. It is still 100% relevant. So if you want to know more about why it's helpful or even necessary sometimes to preserve the state of a mapped key, a multi-step mapped key across all of your windows, check that out. That will hopefully clear everything up with that. But then step 2 is the exact opposite, right? So we turn the click bar off, the icon goes away, we turn that mapped key back off, and of course we then preserve the state of the mapped key, and we push everyone to the next step. I can't explain that any better. You're going to need a visualization. It really helps to have a visualization on mapped key step actions. So check that video out if you're thirsting for knowledge. Now the click bars are obviously these the white rectangles, right? And we'll just look at one of these real fast. Click on the button. The magic behind these is that there's a do mouse over, there's a do mapped key action. So we're doing mouse over activate in the non-combat key map. So we come down here to mouse over activate. We add in a, sorry, my UPS just took over. There must have been some weird surge or something. But the power went out. So a lot of things are hooked up to the UPS. Anyway, we throw in a sync cursor action, and then here we're using a key map state action to turn click bar mouse over state on. You following me? We're going to the click bar mouse over state. We're turning this on. So what happens is when we mouse over into this area, this mapped key, or this key map, and all of these mapped keys become active. By default, it's not assigned to a character set or any characters. It's off by default until we mouse into this area. And then all of this becomes active. So then these become active, and we'll just use mouse wheel down as an example because I was showing mouse wheel down before. We'll bring this back over so we have some more room. So mouse wheel down, this is virtualization stuff. So we link this to the mouse wheel down mapped key in click bar mouse over main. So mouse over main, mouse wheel down over here. We do another sync cursor. I try to throw in as many sync cursors as I can along the way. I think it helps a little bit more. One sync cursor action in the whole grand scheme of things doesn't really, I think I misspoke a moment ago. This isn't actually virtualization. This is just linking things together. But anyway, sync cursors are helpful to have along the whole path. And then we send mouse wheel down to my healer ATG, which of course contains my healer. And that's it, right? That's it. So when we mouse into here, a bunch of hotkeys become active specifically for this region. We'll use my tank unit frame for this. I spin mouse wheel down, and it's going to send mouse wheel down to the healer, and mouse wheel down is bound on her action bar, and on that action bar, in that spot, there's a macro, a mouse over macro for healing surge. So I spin my mouse wheel down, she heals the tank using a mouse over macro, right? Because if you switch to the healer, if we do this, I'll show you the macro real fast. We're almost done. This is the very end of all this. Here's your healing surge. It's just the standard mouse over macro. Nothing fancy or special or cryptic or anything like that. It's a basic mouse over macro, right? And that's fine. And that works just great, right? So when I'm outside of the click bar, on the healer screen, she will, I can use this just like I normally would over unit frames. However, when you're on the tank, how do you use those mouse over macros? Well, you use the click bar healing. The click bar healing. Now, I'm hopefully going to be able to show this in sort of a zoom. If you watch, I'm going to mouse into these regions. And this is really for beginners. Anyone who's using this knows how this works already. But I'm going to mouse into these regions, and you're going to see the cursor sync up in my shaman's window. So here we go. You can see the cursor moving, but it's syncing only as I enter the region. Only as I enter the region. I have to enter the region in order to get my mouse cursor to be there. I can't just send my mouse cursor there magically. But you can see that syncing up. So as I move over the again, it's kind of a small screen, but we're moving over the tank unit frame. We spin mouse wheel down, and that's that. That's how you use mouse over macros for a healer, or I guess for anyone who has a healing spell, or any spell you want to use as a mouse over macro on your team. Now, I know that's confusing, and it's a little confusing for me to explain it in such a quick way, but again, this has a dedicated video to it in the Pro System Videos series. I promise you. And even if click bar healing is difficult to wrap your head around, because it can be, it also comes with a drawback to where your unit frames in all of the windows that you're playing and you're multiboxing with, all the characters have their party and or raid unit frames to be in the exact same order. So as I switch between these two characters, their unit frames are in the exact same order, right? It wouldn't work if these two characters were switched around in the tank screen and they were different in the healer screen. Because I would come in here and I would think I'm healing the tank and I would actually be healing someone else, right? And that doesn't work if they're not in the same order. So if this is difficult to understand and wrap your head around, then I would suggest looking into some sort of video effects healing setup. I have an older video which kind of showcases what you can do with video effects for healing. In the future, there will hopefully be another video which shows more stuff. But for right now, that's all I've got. It's just one older video that talks about healing using video effects, as well as some other methods as well. I'll try to remember to link all of these videos that I talk about in this video. I try to link all of these videos in the description so you can check them out if you're interested. But I think that is it. If you're still with me, thank you for watching. It's been a long one. This is my setup though. And again, any questions about why I did something in the profile, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you need help setting up click bar healing from scratch, that isn't something that we're going to get resolved in YouTube comments tucked away on the internet somewhere. Please check out that video, check, and then come to the forum if you've got problems. You're like, I'm at this step, it's not working. Here's my profile, right? We ask for people's profiles when we want to look at them and we want to help troubleshoot things with you. So that's definitely the place to ask for more intricate, more detailed questions. Please, the ISBoxer forum. I only just point this out because I get a lot of questions and comments that are just really detailed stuff. And it's like, man, you would get better results if you just went to the forum. Because there's more than just me there who will answer questions, right? And it's in a public forum, public knowledge. Everyone can benefit from that. So again, thank you for watching. If you stuck with me all this long, if you didn't, you won't even know what I'm saying at this point. But hopefully see you guys in the future streams. There'll be highlight videos for what we're doing and whatnot. And 2+3 vlog updates along the way, hopefully on our journey to 110. Thank you for watching. My name is MiRai, and I will see you in the next video.